Bart, it is such a pleasure to have you here today with us on Real Vision. Blockchain Capital is one of the true OG VC shops in the blockchain space. I'm very excited to talk about your journey into the space and also about what you do at Blockchain Capital. Welcome.
Thank you, Ash. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So Bart, let's jump right in and talk a little bit about your journey into the space. We were talking a little bit off camera. You and I actually both had the same job title at the same bank, senior product manager at E-Trade. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the space. I'm always fascinated by product managers because folks who have that background tend to have a very interesting view of the world.
Yeah, so my first job coming out of college, where I did my academic work on the internet, was at E-Trade, and that was in 1997. So we're talking about ancient history here. But a lot of my friends and kind of peers at the time all wanted to go work for Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, or they were doing management consulting. At Princeton, they came at like Bain and McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group would come in and kind of scoop up these kids and then grind them through, 80 to 100-hour weeks, whether you're at Morgan Stanley or McKinsey. And I was really more interested in this burgeoning industry known as the internet. And so there was really only one company to me that had one foot in Silicon Valley, so to speak, and one foot on Wall Street. And that was E-Trade. And so I kind of talked my way in the door there and found a way to the CEO. And then he thought I would be best as a product manager, as you mentioned. And so I kind of had a series of roles in product management that helped me kind of understand what the end user, in this case, our kind of power traders, really wanted. And they wanted special tools and analytics and, charting, and they wanted access to IPOs, actually some of the same stuff that we're seeing today with Robinhood. And so, my experience at E-Trade was really formative in terms of understanding fintech and kind of direct to consumer financial applications. And the theme that I learned there that I think echoes through our industry today is that individuals, if they do their own research and are empowered with the right access to information, can move markets and make smart, educated investment decisions. I mean, so much of what we see from Wall Street is this kind of paternalistic approach to individual investors. We heard SEC Chair Gensler yesterday just say, well, crypto is rife with fraud. And, I could say the currency markets are rife with fraud, or the bond markets or the equity markets. LIBOR was a fraud for 25 years. And so what we're seeing here is it's a kind of a revolution that started in the late 90s with E-Trade and probably continued with Robinhood and continues on to this day with Coinbase and access to crypto assets that feel like an asset class that speaks more generationally to younger investors. And I'm talking about, people in their 20s and 30s. Not their 40s like myself. So E-Trade was a really formative experience for me. Ultimately, it would lead me to start my own company and finally a hedge fund firm with my brother and my partner, who is also my partner at Blockchain Capital.
Boy, very well said, Bart. So many interesting points you made there, and very congruent with our view at Real Vision about empowering people through knowledge and information. Let me just ask, you were extremely early into the blockchain space. I think you guys spun up Blockchain Capital in 2013. That was very early for this industry for people who are relatively new to this space. Tell us what you saw that early. I mean, that's only a few years after the Satoshi white paper.
So our kind of discovery of blockchain technology and crypto, and there was really just Bitcoin then. There was no other blockchain. Started in kind of a strange sector. So as I mentioned in our prior question, my co-founder at Blockchain Capital is my brother, Brad. And before founding Blockchain Capital, we were actually hedge fund managers for a decade. We focused on small cap stocks that were misunderstood by large financial institutions in Wall Street. And we kind of developed some niche investment sectors that we thought were really interesting. One of them was the video game industry. So my brother and I are lifelong gamers. And what we realized is we were old enough to be kind of hedge fund managers on Wall Street, but we're also young enough to be lifelong gamers. And there just wasn't a lot of hedge fund managers that were as young as we were when we started at 27 and 29 when we launched our hedge fund. And so we kind of have an edge in understanding from an end user or a customer point of view, what are the games that were fun to play? And as the industry developed, we saw some really exciting growth stories with massively multiplayer online games. And now, the video game industry or the entertainment software industry, those are synonyms really, is larger than the movie industry. But back then it wasn't the case. But we saw some really interesting user behavior in games like World of Warcraft or Lineage in Korea, where we were investors in these companies. We saw these video game companies launch online worlds. And online worlds had like 10 or 20 million people in them. And then we saw some really strange user behavior. I mean, if you drop 20 million people in an online world, they start acting like they do in the real world. Economies form, friendships form. People want stature. Instead of driving a Porsche, they want to fly on a winged dragon. These are kind of Game of Thrones or Dungeons and Dragon themed medieval type games. And so what we saw that was really peculiar and interesting to us is there wasn't just these in-game online relationships or an in-game economy. There were digital currencies that were being used to kind of power the in-game economies. And so as hedge fund managers, it was our job to kind of understand how these video games were doing. And we started monitoring the prices of these currencies and the velocity of these digital currencies. Now, of course, this was before the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper. So these were not cryptocurrencies. These are like Fortnite bucks or Roblox bucks that you see in games, which are kind of just printed by the video game publisher. But what we saw was users were spending thousands of dollars, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars for digital currency that you could only use in a video game. And that was really interesting to us. And we kind of filed that away. And then in 2012, our friend of ours, Mickey Malka, kind of pointed us to the Bitcoin white paper. And because we had already seen our kind of digital money in these video game worlds, unlike 99% of hedge fund managers who dismissed Bitcoin then, most of them still do, by the way, we decided we wanted to have an educated opinion because we had seen this kind of predecessor behavior with digital currencies and video games. And so we read the Bitcoin white paper. It blew our mind, like it did with many. And then we went and decided that we wanted to have a educated opinion. Everyone was kind of dismissing this technology outright. And we wanted to just have a knowledgeable opinion. So I went and talked to all of the kind of executives in my fintech Rolodex. My brother was a research analyst on Wall Street, focused on kind of security stocks like Checkpoint Software, and did a lot in digital rights management. And if you think about it, blockchain technology is kind of some part fintech, some part secure. These distributed and decentralized cryptographically secured networks are a new security model in many ways. And so we felt like we had kind of the right backgrounds to dive into this industry. We spent about 6 months flying around the world, going to conferences, speaking to legislators, fintech executives, academics, bankers, lawyers, senators, congressmen, governors, regulators. And back then, it was a really interesting culture. I affectionately call it freaks and geeks back then. Had a lot of colorful characters. But the bottom line is, the deeper we dove into this industry, the more we kind of came to two conclusions. Ash, one conclusion was kind of we thought we would get to, and the other one was a surprise. The one we thought we would get to is we thought Bitcoin was super interesting. It looked like a kind of somewhere between a PayPal 2.0 or maybe a gold 2.0. We couldn't quite tell at the time. It had this disinflationary type feature to it. It was decentralized and distributed and transparent, much like the internet. So I was kind of having flashbacks to the mid 90s. And so we started buying Bitcoin for our family, eventually mining Bitcoin in my brother's apartment. Then we moved to our dad's garage, and then we kind of collapsed the transformers there in the hills of Marin County and moved to a data center. And so that was kind of us getting long Bitcoin, and we were building these Bitcoin miners. You couldn't even really buy them off the shelf then. So that got us familiar with the hardware and the software. And obviously it's been a great ride. That early Bitcoin we mined was right around 100. But the kind of surprise that we discovered was underneath the hood. We weren't even using the term blockchain technology back then. But to us, we saw this very robust asset that was kind of had this underpinning of an incredible network below it that reminded us of the internet. I mean, if you think about it, the internet allows for the exchange of data over open protocols. And to us, the blockchain technology looked like an open protocol for the exchange of value or assets. And then we kind of jumped ahead and we said, okay, well, if Bitcoin is the proof of concept that blockchain technology works, what if there's other blockchains? And this was we were like heretics at this point. We went and talked to, Barry Silbert and Wences and some of these guys that were even earlier than us, frankly, by a year or so. And they said, Stephens, what are you doing? This is about Bitcoin. And many people still are those Bitcoin maximalists. And I love Bitcoin. It's been great to us in Blockchain Capital. We just saw a larger world. We said Bitcoin could be the tallest tree in the forest, but what if there's a whole forest? Maybe we should start a venture firm that is, gets us exposure to the kind of Googles and Apples and Facebooks and Salesforce of the blockchain. And we foresaw a future 5, 10, 15 years down the road where there wouldn't just be one crypto asset, one blockchain. There could be millions of blockchains or an internet of blockchains, and there'd be all sorts of programmable digital assets. And so, our firm started kind of with a expansive view of the technology where we wanted to not just own the digital assets, be investor in the companies, to use a civil engineering analogy, that we're building the bridges and roads and tunnels of this brave new world. And so that's why we invested in Coinbase and Kraken and Ripple and some of these early leaders that are now, multi-billion-dollar companies today.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.